and then we'll say hello to people who are here, and then see where we go. Okay. First of all, I want to thank Donald Grimmy again for doing tech. Angie and Nick are going to be reading this morning. Number two, the Long Range Planning Committee. I want to keep on stressing this. We've got 3 people so far, Samantha, Joyce, and Nick. It would be nice if we had 4 more. This is not a search committee. This is simply a way for us to begin to plan for the future. Things have all changed. An example would be that if you take a look at one of our churches in Jacksonville, they're ministers from Seattle, Washington. So by Zoom, everything can change and can keep things affordable as well. And I mean that nicely. So if you're interested in doing some long-range planning, now is a time. There is no stress. It's a good time to do things when things are good and peaceful, not when things blow up. Some shout outs. Corey Pellissier got engaged. Remember, we meet at their house in the summer times when we had no COVID. Corey, one of the twins, got engaged. Margarita is back. Angie turned 85 and Nick turned 90 this week. Happy birthday. They both look very, very young for their ages. It's amazing. Nick still has his hair. I sent to you an attachment called Preachers and Sneakers. I want to share with you, I want to thank Cecilia Lissandro for giving me 2 pairs of $1,500 sneakers. That sound you heard was Cecilia passing out over her chair when I said that. If you haven't read that article, you need to read what is going on today in certain circles. Let me point out that the boat shoes I wear are 12 years old, and the pants and other shirts I wear, thanks to Amazon, are Goodwill prices. Today we are doing one of 3. We're going to put Passover and Palm Sunday, and then Passover and Easter, and then Easter plus one together in a triptych. We'll try something different. So if you can get today's and then move on to the next 2, I hope you'll see that they form a nice trifecta. Today we have some interesting music, as it's the beginning of Passover. It started last sundown. We have some music from Jewish traditions, and one of the music is Sephardic, which many of us are not aware of because it's very Eastern European and very, very Southern Spain. So for those of you who are Spanish, if you think Barcelona on this coast and other places in Spain, close to Morocco, and you're going to be thinking of music in the Balkans, etc., Eastern Europe, you're going to be getting a very, very different type of music than the typical Russian, Polish, German that we usually get in the West. And finally, let's say hello to everybody here this morning. Okay, I didn't know this. Maureen's stepson, Adam, is Sephardic. I didn't know that. Okay, so we say hello to Donald Grimmy, who was supposed to wear a tutu or a toga, but chickened out at the last minute, and we'll remember that. And so remember, what you see in the numbers is only a fraction, because a lot of times there are more than one person when you see this. So we're going to try something new this time around and see where it goes. All right, well, hello to everybody. I hope you have your service with you, and if not, Donald will start us. We start with the memorial candle. The memorial candle today is lit in memory of all of those that have suffered racism. That includes first Americans, and I hope you'll celebrate with me that we finally have somebody who is a Native American who is head of the Department of Interior. One of the secretaries of the Department of Interior said of our first citizens, they should either be civilized or exterminated. Remember racism amongst African Americans, those who are brown and Black and Hispanic, and those who are Jewish and those who are Asian. The amount of racism in this country, if you want to use the word exceptional, is exceptional. And so we light a candle for all of those who have perished and those who will suffer daily from racism. Our introit this morning is from a conservative synagogue on Park Avenue in New York. Ari Schwartz, and a very, very famous Oseh Shalom, let there be peace. We swapped the pieces. Yigdal is a song sung either at the beginning or ending of temple services commemorating 13 principles of Judaism by Maimonides. We swapped that, and we'll getting back to Ari Schwartz in a minute. Our call to worship is also by one of our Jewish ministers. The UUA has attracted over the years a number of people who are Jewish in their faith and background. Danny Katner is the minister of First UU in Dallas, and he has written this call to worship, and I ask you quietly to read at home the indented part. Today, we begin the walk to Jerusalem, the Holy Week. The demand that we face the darkness, the broken path, the abuse of power. Today, we walk towards the day spring breaking through, the Easter day of joy. So let us prepare the way. Let us join together this morning in worship to see what holiness resides within and about us, and to welcome in the day and make straight the path of the Word of God. And a morning prayer for those who wish. You, the soul and heart of life itself, may we recognize your presence, riding upon a simple beast of burden down the crooked streets of Jerusalem. May we not require the psalms of victory and praise, the accolades and shouts of the multitude to see your glory. In gentleness, patience, loving kindness, and yes, plain pain, and sometimes death. Your way of peace, of faith, hope, and love still is our path, our joy, our way. Amen. And now we'll listen to the cantors Ari Schwartz and Shir Lissack, Oseh Shalom. The reading that Angie's going to read was written in the 1930s. It does offend many traditionalists, and I'm sorry for that, but it is true. And sometimes truth offends. And so I'm asking Angie to read this from John Loams. If you would, please, Angie.
Jesus knew nothing of the dogmas of the Christian creeds, the fall of man, the inheritance of sin, damnation as a punishment for sin, the incarnation, the atonement, salvation, and redemption, and would not have understood their meaning or even recognized their words. It cannot be emphasized too often that Jesus was not a theologian. He interpreted religion as something not primarily to be believed, but to be lived.
Yes, that's from a long time ago. And Spinoza and others said that even centuries before. A responsive reading from Mark's Gospel for those of you who wish. If you would read the parts in blue. Then they brought the colt to Jesus and threw their cloaks on it, and he sat on it. Many people spread their cloaks on the road, and others spread leafy branches that they had cut in the fields. Then those who went ahead and those who followed were shouting, Hosanna, blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the coming of the kingdom of our ancestor David. Hosanna in the highest. And from what is now called the third part of the prophet Isaiah, we're asking Nick to read from Isaiah 53.
By a pervasion of justice, he was taken away. Who could have imagined his future? For he was cut off from the land of the living, stricken for the transgression of my people. They made his grave with the wicked and the tomb with the rich. Although he had done no violence and there was no deceit in his mouth.
Thank you. And Bob Marley. Grant us, we ask, to speak, to hear, and to learn, so that our fears may be banished, our minds may become enlightened, our faith be increased, our steps directed towards you. Amen. Before I begin, I want to share a couple of thoughts. First of all, I have some observations this morning before we begin For those of you that are new to All Souls or fairly new, let me just share that it has been my understanding throughout my career that simply there are many of us that are called to do various jobs in a community. Some are called to be artists, some are called to be plumbers, some are called to be nurses, some are called to be farmers. And throughout history, there have been those who have been called to guard rituals, to understand texts, and to help people try to gather, as what John Fraser said, is there a less visible world that we somehow wrestle with? I do not see myself as special, and I certainly don't believe that I am preaching the word of God. What I do feel is that I have been called for a variety of reasons, most of which I don't always understand, to work with others as they plot their path, to guide rituals, to help us along the way, and to try to look at texts and writings to enlighten us. So as I start my observations, that's simply to say, if you don't agree with them, that's perfectly fine. Remember, a lot of times we all have observations. We think they're interesting, but maybe mine today aren't, but I think they'll be annoying, which you would expect. I want to start off with, I think the problem with us, we're very, very well aware of the problems of conservative religion. We are extremely good at criticizing evangelical religion, conservative religion, traditional religion. We are not good at taking a look at liberal religion, which has issues of its own. And so today I'm going to take some observations of liberal religion. Number one, there's an anti-Christian bias, which I find totally unacceptable. Why? Because when you ask the average liberal today what they mean by Christianity, they think of judgmental white evangelical Protestantism. That is not Christianity. That is a small segment of Christianity that is very annoying and very loud. But let me remind you that Christianity is based upon originally the teachings and ideas of a Galilean preacher, not on a council that met in the 300s of some Greek bishops and a few Latin ones thrown in, coming up with language that Jesus would have never understood. So let us remember then, when we talk about Christianity, to get our stuff together and realize it's about Jesus, not the other junk that comes along. There's this anti-Christian bias that's just got to stop. We should know better. Number two, liberal religion is too cerebral. It's too intellectual. There's like a distrust, a discounting of emotions and religious experiences. The fact of the matter is most of us are religious in terms of our emotions. If you want to think of religion as a feeling of emotions and experiences in the largest sense of the word, then too cerebral is, it's not enough. It's not enough. John Fraser was with us. Why? He's an atheist and intellectual. What does he say? He has all these experiences, and it doesn't meet his intellectual criteria, so he's having to readjust. We don't operate just on our intellect. We have emotional moments and we have experiences that don't always fit in a box. Get over it. That's the way life is. And I don't know what it is with liberal religion that thinks it's all cerebral. That is not a way to go. You need a balance between emotions and what your mind learns. And we've lost the balance. Number three, anti-rituals. I have never understood what it is with liberalism and rituals. Now, I have another, this is going to be really annoying. Well, there are two rituals in the UUA which have run into a real broadside, and this will surprise many of you. Number one, many of you like the water ritual, the water communion it's called. I bet you have no idea when this started. It was started in 1980 by a bunch of very wealthy, very intellectual women. That tells you it was classist and gender-oriented right off the bat. And so now we're finding a backlash in congregations because the idea was you were supposed to bring water from wherever you went. So you get a lot of people in congregations saying, well, I'm sorry, I wasn't wealthy enough to go traveling to Costa Rica, to this, to that, to the Holy Land and bring waters back. And so I'm sorry, we don't have the money to bring back fancy water from all over the place. Yes. You know, I'm glad some very wealthy, very highly intelligent women wanted to come up with something that was interesting, but it doesn't speak to the broadness of humankind. Flower communion, where does that start? It starts in June 1923 by a congregation in Czechoslovakia that was anti-Catholic. That is not the way you start rituals. You start rituals that have the great breadth that speak to human experience. Do you notice in this group we have the Jesus meal, bread and a cup? Do you know how far back that goes? To Anatolia, 10,000 BCE, when they first started harvesting wheat and offered simple bread and cup to strangers. Now that is a ritual. It's been around for a long time because it has nothing to do with class, it has nothing to do with gender, it has nothing to do with money. You offer bread and a cup. You don't need a bunch of wealthy people from a certain class traveling all over the place saying, isn't this wonderful? And you don't start a ritual because you're mad at another part of Christianity. When you have a baptism or a baby naming, you use water. Water keeps us alive. Water refreshes us. That too has been used in rituals for millennia. So I don't understand what there is this thing about rituals that help bind human beings. My constant ministry has been that liberals seem to think because you have a ritual, you must have an orthodox information of the ritual. In other words, the ritual must always have orthodox words in it. No, you can have liberal words in an ancient ritual. We do it here all the time. This service that you and I use on Sundays is a classic sacrament of word and sacrament in all the classic ancient Christian churches. Yet the content of this ritual is not traditional at all. There are certain things that speak beyond the box. So yes, I don't understand the anti-Christian bias that forgets Jesus. I remember growing up in a church, it seemed as if there was the religion of Paul. Jesus never got mentioned. Hello, Jesus, not Paul. Too cerebral, anti-ritual. And while I'm at it, liberals seem to have amnesia or denial. In AA, the very famous phrase is, denial is not a river in Egypt. There is this feeling in liberal religion, the infinite perfectibility of humankind. Really, have you ever looked at our DNA? Our DNA it's the big elephant in the room. We are almost 99% chimpanzee. And I tell my students, forget Psychology 101, study Primatology 101, then go into Psychology 101. If you ever studied how troops of chimpanzees behave, your hair would fall out. That's what happened to me. That's the way I lost my hair. I looked at the way chimpanzees behave. And if you want to take a look at human beings, understand human beings' behavior, just look at our DNA. Just look, I'll give you two little things. Women, did you ever notice guys on the football field or soccer field always slapping other men's butts? Did you ever notice that and wonder why did they do that? Look at what men do in troops of chimps. Did you ever notice when Obama or that president, which shall not be named in this group, walked to give the State of the Union, everybody had to touch. Did you ever notice that? Little hands went out touching. What happens when the alpha male walks by in a troop of chimps? All the chimps have to touch. There is so much basic human behavior that you and I exhibit that we're in denial about. So when you take a look at what happens to Jesus, when you take a look at crucifixions, we act as if this is the exception to the rule. I looked up civilian casualties in the 20th century. Civilians who died. Over 100 million innocent civilians died in the conflicts of war in the 20th century. Not combatants, innocent civilians. Have you ever looked at troops of chimps fighting over the same pieces of ground, same pieces of real estate? We are exceptionally chimpanzee, but better armored, better weaponized. So I'm just sharing with you some feelings I have. And then there is the other side of us, which just doesn't do the balance. We love that famous thing for Ecclesiastes, for everything there is a season. But you notice how we leave the other half off. A season to mourn, a season to refrain from affection, a season to lose, a season to throw away, a season to shut up, a season to hate, and a season to die. We always forget that part. We always read the other parts. So as I begin my Palm Sunday thoughts, I share with you, we're not prepared for Palm Sunday, most of us, because we got all this stuff we bring in the way. And liberals have a bubble in which they think they are exempt from critique. Nobody is exempt from critique. So I just share that with us. And so now I begin thoughts about Palm Sunday. It has been an observation that you and I have been stuck with the movie versions. Now, those of you who are younger, that would probably be here, everybody than me that's younger. Most of you that are under 30 and under escaped the great movies of the 50s and 60s, the great religious extravagance. You escaped all of that, which is too bad, because what I'm about to say is not going to make any sense. You got these panoramic images of Jesus arriving with thousands, hundreds of thousands, palms, color, shouting, trumpets, the whole junk. Do you want to know what the size of Jerusalem was at the time of Jesus, everybody? About 20,000. Traditionalists may push it up to 70. That was it. That was it. It was in the interior on the side of a hill, and it was not a magnificent city, as cities go 2,000 years ago. It wasn't. It didn't have anything to offer. It was inland. To the east of Jerusalem was what? The Dead Sea and sand. To the west of Jerusalem is where the goods were, all the agriculture and the olive orchards. But Jerusalem itself was stuck on a mountain, on the side of a mountain, in a not very pleasant area. It was hot, it was cold, it was windy and sand all over the place. It was not what you've seen in the movies. So the movie version does not help us. What in fact is we see these big panoramas, and they may stick in our minds, or you may hear Hosanna's in the highest and stuff. We got those two pesky things at the end of the week, like Maundy Thursday. Let me point out, by the way, in terms of Maundy Thursday, the Last Supper, did Jesus even know it was going to be the Last Supper? Did those people there even know it was going to be the Last Supper? The answer is no. Number two, they did not sit at a table like Da Vinci painted it. They reclined around a table. Number three, if it was a Passover meal, it wouldn't have been all males. It would have been everybody in all the families, little kids, women, friends, cousins. The thing is wrong on so many levels, it's annoying. And then finally, as my professors pointed out, who is going to remember the exact words of what was said? Who's going to remember does anybody remember the exact words of anything that was said 2 months from now? Think about that. And finally, I love this too. In Christian iconography, the Holy Grail. Where did Jesus eat? At a very poor inn where they used wooden utensils. So let me get this straight. You're going to go back 2 or 3 months later and said, by the way, do you happen to have that wooden bowl or that wooden plate that we used 3 months ago at Passover? Really? I don't know where we come up with this stuff. Keeping it simple, a Galilean peasant who some loved what he had to say, remember him at a religious holiday, a few hundred people gather at one of the gates while the rest of the place of the city is over by the temple with all the scribes, the Pharisees, and the high priest. And he comes in through a side area, a few hundred people from the Galilee. The Judeans will have nothing to do with him. He doesn't look Judean. He doesn't speak Judean. He doesn't have the accent. If any of you have been to my class, we've talked about the differences between living and being in the Galilee versus living and being in Judea. Same thing. So a few hundred citizens from Galilee remember him, they hear him, and they welcome him. And then, of course, there's that pesky thing about the crucifixion, which nobody really likes to talk about. It's uncomfortable. In fact, the times in which Jesus lived were broken. And you and I don't get that in the panoramic visions of shouting and palm trees and branches and hosannas and everything else. It was not sunshine, lollipops, and roses. There were no unicorns, I'm sorry to say. Have any of you heard of Publius Quintilius Varus? No, you have not. He was the governor of Syria, and a couple of years before Jesus was born, he wiped out 3 Galilean villages and crucified 2,000 Galileans in a row, killed them to death violently because they didn't pay taxes. The amount of banditry during the time of Jesus and guerrilla warfare was incredible, and the responses are what you would expect. Mass village burning and hundreds and thousands of crucifixions and deaths. Has anybody ever heard of Hezekiah, son of Judas the Galilean, Simon, a slave of Herod, I can't even pronounce his name, Athgranges, there's somebody else called the Samaritan, Theudas, and Jacob, and Simon. These 6 nobles, all peasants, led massive Galilean revolts against Rome. And they were put down massively and with much death. This was not a place to live, folks, and not a good place at all if you were Jewish. I don't know if you knew this, there were 3 messiahs in the 1st century of the Common Era. Most people are not aware of that. Hezekiah and his group were brutally massacred. Thaddeus and his group were brutally massacred. Jesus was crucified, but they couldn't find his followers because they were all hiding, and there weren't that many of them. Hezekiah and Thaddeus had hundreds, if not thousands, of followers, and they were easily identified. Jesus' crowd was small and hiding. Three messiahs in the 1st century of the Common Era before the revolt. The real entry then was small. It was not a place to live. From the Bible itself, listen to these words of brokenness. These are actual nouns in the Bible discussing the times. Occupational forces, night, enemy king, outcasts, controversy, commotion, danger, body, blood, chains, whip, blood, and spears. Is that sounding like lollipops and roses and the big things we saw on TV and everything is fine and lovely? It gives you a society that was occupied brutally. Judea was a place that was heavily ethnically divided, even though they were Jewish. The times were broken, the place was broken, the people were broken, and the systems were broken. We know brokenness. You and I know brokenness. We know brokenness nationally. While the person who shall not be named who claimed the big lie was talking about how exceptional we are, I'll give you exceptional. Native Americans have been treated like, I have to use my language, Jews now, anti-Semitism, because people don't like Netanyahu. 80% of the Jews in this country can't stand Netanyahu. But certain people don't read, so they just go nuts. We have not treated Africans right since the beginning. How did they get here? By being slaves. That's not the way you treat Africans well. And what about Asians? Because you know who called it the Asian flu. Let me remind everybody a very inconvenient fact. We get this thing about how great it is to be in Western Europe. Have you ever studied geographically what happened to Western Europe in the last millennia? 33,000 years ago, a volcano went off and wiped out all of Europe. A volcano in lovely Italy blew up Europe. Who repopulated Europe, folks? People from the East. 22,000 years ago, there was an ice age in Europe. Glaciers went down to the Mediterranean, and most of the European civilians died. Who populated people from Europe? People from the East. Those of you who are Spanish, we hear great things about Spain. Most people know nothing about northern Spain. It was highly unpopulated in the 3rd and 4th centuries. And who populated them? Goths and Visigoths. They came from East Europe, but before that, they came from Kazakhstan. So for those of you who are Spanish, Borat may have been your cousin, DNA-wise. We make these comments and have no idea half the time what we're talking about. We have national brokenness. We have Florida brokenness. Our governor seems to think we're doing well. The national rankings puts us at 26, and he's being sued because he won't give out the actual statistics of how many people have actually died, how many people have not been vaccinated, and how come we haven't dealt with Spanish and Black people well at all in this state. He has to be sued because he won't give out those facts and figures. Miami, did you read the Herald the other day? This was lovely. One of our former mayors wanted to put in a 900,000 sculpting thing at our expense and got called on it and got mad. Then another one of our commissioners evidently hired this woman for work. She was making $70,000 and never showed up. He got called on, and these two got in a shouting match, went all over the country, where the one who has no leg to stand on said to the other one in front of the entire public, I'm going to vomit. You give me that. And they went at this, these two, and everybody sat back looking at this, and I'm thinking, these are two 5-year-olds in a parking lot. And they are on the city commission of one of the major cities in the state of Florida. Brokenness. And then we have our own brokenness. Everybody here I know has had bad times. Everybody here I know has suffered self-esteem. Everybody here I know has had health problems. Everybody here I know has had loss. I know you all. And everybody here has been broken at one time or another. And then we do stupid things. I share this with you because I want you to laugh at my expense, because I want to share with you how we all do stupid things. I was saying to myself, this is always bad. I'm handling the fact that my stepfather died in July and my mother died a few weeks ago, and I'm handling this just well. So I called my brother, because he called me, and I said, what's up? He says, I've had a bad time. So he shares with me, and I start to laugh. And I said to him, you and I are both amazing. We've got all this intelligence, and you and I don't have enough intelligence to fit into a thimble. He said, what are you talking about? I said, you worked 2 years nonstop caring for them, day in and day out, and now it's over. And boom, what happens when you stop and you've been doing, and you stop dead? Everything falls apart. We should have known that. He said, I never thought about that. He said, what about you? Oh, I said, I'm brilliant. I had a relapse into workaholism. Let me share with you all how stupid I am. I put a wedding together, 100 and some outlines, 100 and some quizzes, shutters for the house, and then I put together Palm Sunday, Easter, and Easter +1. Does anybody my age do that when you have a heart transplant? No, that is absolute relapse workaholic behavior. We all screw up. We all have moments of brokenness. Everyone here. It's part of what you look around. This is not sunshine, lollipops, and roses. Life is not unicorns. Although, if you bear with me, a few more minutes, I have something to say about that. The idea of Palm Sunday is to remind us that things go in rhythms. It's like Taoism, things ebb and flow. But you need both. The reason you are here and the reason you are healthy and working on their health, because you have experienced unhealth and you've experienced health, and you know these things go back and forth. You know that. And that's why you're here, because you look for moments to give you some more touchstones for health. So when you have those broken moments, you know you're not alone and you've got things to work with. There's a very famous quote that sums up why we need a Palm Sunday. I am recovering the claim. A Scotsman said this. I'm recovering the claim that Jesus was not crucified in a cathedral between two candles. What a surprise that is. Jesus was not crucified in a candle between two, who knew? But on a cross between two thieves on a town garbage dump, because that's where you crucified people, out in the garbage. At a crossroads of politics so cosmopolitan, they had to write his title in Hebrew and Latin and Greek. He was crucified at the kind of place where cynics talk smut, thieves curse, and soldiers gambled. Because that is where he died. That is what he died about. And that's where we ought to be. And we ought to be moving to make sure that what he died about is not in vain. And Easter then is a reminder that brokenness can be restored and healed. And you need the one to go with the other. And Easter +1 is about those griefs that we bury and shouldn't bury as well. So every year in our rhythms, our liturgies, we hold up brokenness because we've all been there. We hold up being restored because we've all been there too. And we acknowledge there are times that we don't have to be embarrassed about moments that we have grief. And we hold those up too. Because if Jesus told us anything, we're in it for the whole bit. The good, the bad, the good news, the bad news, the brokenness, but then the restored. So that's what I leave with us. This is what we can be. This is what we are about. This is what we shall be. Acknowledging the whole totality of our lives, both bad and good. And this is our journey. This is what we do. Sometimes well, sometimes not so well, but we do it together. Amen. In the beginning of all souls, there was a desire from the very beginning that we have a way of having communion regularly, but not done the way that everybody was used to having it done. And I said, then why not go back to the way Jesus did it? And they said, what do you mean by that? And I said, a simple bread and cup. He followed the ancient custom that started in Anatolia, which we now call Turkey, when they first harvested wheat, to offer a simple bread. And we did simply this because it was easy to do. It's unleavened bread and a simple cup. And we took then unfermented wine, and we would pour the wine into a cup, and then we would take bread and break it, and we'd have a bowl, a simple bowl, and people would come forward for those who wish and take a piece of bread and then place it in the cup and eat. And for many that worked, and for some it didn't. But to be sure that we kept the circle intact, we made sure that everybody was invited up and said the following words. And I'll ask you to put the following words, and we printed them out from now on now, that we can say these together. And let's do that. Promise me you'll remember. You are braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, smarter than you think. God didn't promise days without pain, laughter without sorrows, sun without rain. But the divine did promise strength for the day, comfort for the tears, and light for the way. On that note of light, we remind everybody that we adopted something from AA and NA a very long time ago called the black chip. Now, I don't know if any of you are new to us here and are not aware of the black chip. The black chip is before you leave an NA or AA meeting, if you have something that's bothering you, the number one reason people relapse is resentment. So if you have something that's going to cause you resentment, you pick up a black chip to remind you to work on this thing. How this wound up in a religious meeting, I have no idea, but it made sense. Why come to church if you go away with a resentment and you're not going to work on it? So we decided to try this, and we've gone through boxes of these. I remind you, if you've run out or you need them, to email me and we will send you a bunch. You're free. Does anybody need to return a black chip? Does anybody need to return a black chip? Anybody need to return a black chip? Does anybody need to pick a black chip up? Does anybody need to hold a black chip for this week? I'm picking up one from my brother and I, that he had a black day and did nothing. And I worked myself to death in not dealing with death. So I'm picking one up for relapsed behavior. I told him he ought to pick up one too. For all of us, it's a reminder to work on things that we need to work on. A concluding prayer, and then do stay afterwards so we can say hello. We've got some music, and then a concluding prayer, and then a music and a benediction. May the blessings of God be upon us in this hour and in the days to come, that we may seek the truth more devotedly, that we may think more independently, that we may reflect more searchingly, that we may know ourselves more completely, that we may forgive more quickly, we may think or pray more thoughtfully, we may act more courageously, we may live more nobly. And apropos for coming to Easter, a Gregorian song, I'll Find My Way Home. And now may the road rise to meet you. May the wind be always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face, and may the rains fall softly upon your fields. And when we meet again, may the divine in me greet and embrace the divine in you. Amen. Before we go, let's say hello to everybody this morning. I want to ask you, this is probably a silly kind of question. Did any of you ever get kind of weepy when you listen to some of the music? Get a little teary-eyed? I found today, I was listening to Oseh Shalom, and then listening to Bob Marley, and then listening to the African-American spiritual, and then the last one with the beautiful setting. And I think I'm very, very fortunate to be with people who like such a variety of music, because each of the music speaks to a different part of us. And so we listen to some very ancient music, and some very different kinds of music, and it's very, it says more than the words ever do in many ways. So we want to thank all of you here. We welcome you to Easter, in which we look at the other parts of Palm Sunday, and we will look at then afterwards disenfranchised grief. Grief that all of us share, but we're told we have to hide, and that's not healthy. So let us continue then our journeys together as one, with music, thought, and good deed. Lots of love. See you next weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 Happy Easter.
Bye.
Love hearing.
Farewell.
Bye, everyone. Enjoy your Sunday.
Thanks,
Thank
Serge.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.